Hello, everyone, and welcome to WooStream's Willamette in Dialogue webinar series, where we're bringing Willamette to you specifically through a Woo lens with our latest session, An Artist Goes to Long Beach. My name is Sayre Cohen, and I'm an assistant director for the Alumni Community Engagement Team here at the university. Tonight's session will focus on how the creative documentation of stories from underserved communities can also be utilized for tailoring continued support and growth of its people. I'm so excited to introduce you to our speaker, Kat Ross. Kat Ross is a researcher, creative technologist, and performing artist whose practice is centered in social and environmental justice as they relate to burgeoning technologies. Their work finds form in virtual and augmented reality, spatialized sound, 3D environmental design and animation, data visualization, and live performance. Research-based intermedia works include collaborations with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Creative and Emergent Technology Institute, Unity Technologies, and Make Think Code. Their creative work has been featured at Portland Institute of Contemporary Art, Pacific Works Northwest, Center of Contemporary Art and Culture, Indivisible Gallery, and various virtual platforms. Catherine holds a BFA in Intermedia Arts from Pacific Northwest College of Art and is currently based in Portland, Oregon. Kat, thank you so much for joining us, and we're so excited to dive into your work this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Kat Ross. I'm a creative researcher, artist, and performer. My practice is social, environmental justice related. As Sayre mentioned, I have a BFA in Intermedia Arts from PNCA. Just a little bit about my background. I grew up in music and dance. My mother is a composer and my dad was a tribal rights lawyer. We grew up very under-resourced. Working in art and social justice isn't always a lucrative endeavor, but I definitely inherited a passion for art as a tool for social change. I graduated high school a few years early, and from age 16, I started traveling. I was really interested in the self-study of language. I was really interested in experiencing other cultures, studying music and dance. And for about 10 years of the beginning of my life, I lived in over 20 countries. Around age 28, I decided I wanted to come back to the States and go to school. I enrolled in PNCA. I was studying painting and sound and performance art at the time. And I was exposed to creative coding and new media by a mentor who was also the creator of the Make Think Code lab at PNCA named Nandini Ragnathan. She's also the founder and she runs a creative and emergent technology institute here in Portland. Upon graduation, in 2018, I was the first fellow for a pilot program created by another mentor that I had at PNCA, Emily Bosanquet, who was an art and science professor at the time, and Ruth Howell, who is the communications director for NOAA Fisheries West Coast. The pilot program was based in the Pacific Northwest, so from Newport, Oregon, up through Seattle, Washington, and it was focused on natural resource management within NOAA Fisheries. The fellowship was designed to pair artists with NOAA fisheries policymakers and scientists, stakeholder communities, and it was basically engaging designers or artists to create works about what they were experiencing with the agency to motivate behavioral change. And this was sort of the beginning of my relationship collaborating with NOAA. I spent a year embedded within the agency. I was interviewing across departments of NOAA, from stock assessors to field biologists to branch management. I went on a few at-sea surveys. So screen left, there's an image of the Last Straw, which was a boat. I went on a 7-day leg. And just to give you sort of like an idea of how strapped a lot of the NOAA budgets, federal budgets are, they charter often commercial fishing vessels like small boats. They pay whatever meager federal budget that they have, and they just count basically the fish that are being caught on those commercial surveys. And something that's like really fascinating to that point is that these biologists sometimes focus their entire career on a single species or subspecies even. So it's just like this amazing amount of time and labor that goes into following, tracking a species over time So really like to provide information on ocean health or environmental health. It involves a lot of working parts and a lot of labor placed on individual kind of like specialized interests. In addition to interviewing commercial fishing captains and deckhands, I also interviewed laborers at the Pacific Seafood Processing Plant that's located in Newport, Oregon, which is one of the largest seafood distributors on the West Coast. So screen right, you can see an image of folks processing fish that are caught off of the Oregon coast. I also interviewed some tribal stakeholders and attended council meetings to observe sort of the decision-making process around the allocation of fish as a resource. And what I was sort of focusing my research on was like the complexity of labor dynamics involved in managing oceans and fish populations as, you know, like a resource across a variety of communities. The work that came out of that, I created and directed a performance piece called Inter that was performed by the Pacific Northwest Dance Ensemble that's local to Newport, Oregon, where I was doing most of my research. At the time that I was doing this, I was starting to experiment with data as a raw creative material. So taking information from interviews to inform the choreography, field recordings that I had taken to build up the sound design, and video documentation for projections. This experience was so rewarding, just based on how many collaborators I got to engage with. The NOAA acoustic survey team provided me with sonic data from their at-sea research. I was also granted access to a bunch of data sets that were charting fish density and ocean temperatures, just like such a huge amount of information collected to predict the health and status of our oceans. I also got to be deeply embedded in the community. One of the at-sea surveys that I went on the last straw that I had mentioned, the fish boat captain really loved guitar and Fleetwood Mac, and had a guitar in his in the cabin where he was driving and operating on the machinery. And it was such an amazing break because the work on these boats is so hard. You wake up so early and you're just like in a wetsuit, documenting fish all day. So I did get to help with that, which was an amazing experience, but I was like so grateful to have this respite with this captain, and so grateful to my mother for teaching me how to play some of these Fleetwood Mac songs so that he would allow me to be there. But his wife was Nancy Middleman, actually directs this. She's a dancer and directs the Pacific dance community that I was able to work with. So it was a team of 20 dancers. We got to perform this in 2019 at the Newport's Performing Arts Center. And it was amazing because we performed it in front of a community that's very deeply entrenched in the content. Almost everyone is either connected to a NOAA employee or connected to the commercial fishing industry or to the Pacific Seafood Plant workers. So moving on from that experience, a little bit more about my personal work. During COVID, I co-created an immersive media company with Marin Vesley, who's also a PNCA alum that I met at the Mixing Code Lab. Called Love, Death, Design. It was sort of our response to being physically restricted from making art in public. So we took the opportunity to self-learn game and world building within a design platform called Unity to make pieces for social and environmental justice. We created a project called Gone to Water, which is an animated playable VR documentary. We call it a docu-game. It's kind of an undefined field. And it's a small field of creators working in this medium. So it was really fun. It was also like very tedious and explorative, kind of doing a lot of things for the first time. And the content was focused on urban oil production in South Los Angeles on Tongva land. So again, it was a documentary style work that was focused on the community health impacts of hydrocarbon pollution in those at-risk communities. And for this project, we collaborated with several nonprofits, schools, activist groups, and community members in 4 of the main neighborhoods that are most affected by urban oil production. We conducted interviews, we attended toxic tours, we went to local council meetings, and we also engaged a lot with the local creative community. We highlighted creative works within the piece from local poets, painters, 3D designers, musicians, and dancers. This image is from a scene from the Los Cerritos wetlands, which is a sacred Pumbunga site near to Long Beach. And since 1921, it's been completely overrun by oil production. There's still active oil production there today. And the site's extremely critical to the local watershed and to a diversity of fish and wildlife. It's also a sacred indigenous site that was historically used for trading and then still in a contemporary time sense is used for fishing and spiritual connection to the land. So in this scene, the viewer sits in a moving canoe and takes sort of a virtual tour through the wetlands. It's accompanied by an oration by a woman named Rebecca Robles, who's an Ahashman tribal culture keeper. And she gives sort of an indigenous account of the land and its importance to Native American culture and Native American cosmology. The scene is animated with local flora and fauna that are found there in the wetlands. The sound design was created from field recordings that were taken from the location. And at the end of the canoe ride, it ends with a song by Adelia Sandoval, who is an Ahashman tribal songkeeper, and a motion capture dance work by Indigenous artist Divine Brick, just to give you sort of an idea of what the project looked like. In this work, we were continuing to kind of push this idea of data as a raw material for interpretation. So translating physical locations into virtual locations with LiDAR scans and field recordings and direct accounts from frontline communities. This project was supported by Unity Game Engine, the United Nations, and Project Drawdown in their Unity for Humanity program, which was so amazing to have that support. It enabled us to scope the work out, enabled us to compensate all of our contributors fairly, and eventually to tour the piece. This work premiered internationally at the Sejong Institute for Contemporary Art in South Korea last summer, and has since shown in Brazil and Los Angeles, and will continue to be shown this year. So toward the end of the work that I was doing on Gone to Water, I returned to my work with NOAA as the 2023 Art and Science Fellow. The pilot that I did in 2018, after that, it continued on to be a partnership between NOAA and ACAD, which is the Association of Independent Colleges of Art and Design. The 2023 fellowship focused on imagining ways to identify and engage recreational and subsistence fishing communities affected by federal fishery management in Long Beach, California. So basically identifying like who's fishing along the shoreline, what are their needs, what resources do they have access to, and what kind of resources are not being provided for them. It was part of a DEI initiative that was called the EEJ, the Equity Environmental Justice Plan, that was put out in 2022. So Long Beach, California is one of the most diverse cities in the United States. It's located on the traditional lands of the Tongva and the Hashman tribes. And indigenous stewardship of this land dates back tens of thousands of years. It's a history of a symbiotic balance between humans and the natural world that's been relentlessly violated by land theft, genocide, industrial development, and resource extraction. This image that you see is of the Port of Long Beach, which is one of the largest and highest volume in the country. So you can just imagine the impact that has on the local coastline communities. So in addition to being subjected to unparalleled industrial production, Long Beach has been a target for toxic waste disposal. In 1947, there were over 14 sites off the Southern California coast that were approved for dumping of military explosive material, radioactive waste, and various industrial byproducts, including, I think, 3 million metric tons of petroleum waste. So if you look top screen left, that's an image from the Environmental Protection Agency, sort of a map detailing some of that toxic dumping. In 2024, the EPA reported a history of over 50 designated Superfund sites in and around Long Beach that continue to impact the air, soil, and water quality along the coastline there. The Palos Verdes Shelf Superfund site, for example, is an area of contaminated sediment off of the Palos Verdes Peninsula. So if you look bottom screen left at that fish contamination zone image, fish and marine mammals found in this area contain super high concentrations of DDT, which is a volatile pesticide that was actually banned in 1972, and they stopped production in 1982. Montrose Chemical Corp, who's the world's largest manufacturer of DDT, who are still in operation in other parts of the world, they just shut this one down in 82, were the main contributors to this. PCBs are also another hazardous substance that's predominantly found in this area. So basically, this is a lethal and very health impacting amount of chemicals that are found in this very densely populated area off the coast of Long Beach, California. And it's screen right, you can see the 4 locations that I focused my outreach and field research. So Cabrillo Pier, the Long Beach shoreline, the Belmont Pier, and the Los Cerritos wetlands. The legacy of toxic waste disposal continues to have really devastating consequences upon the ecosystem and the diversity of communities that call Long Beach home. Access to healthy and abundant fish stocks, such as historically important coastal pelagic species managed by NOAA, along with some highly migratory species. These are all really, critical to shore-based anglers because of their delicate role in managing the ecosystem balance in this area. And, just off of some of those map images that I showed on the last slide, the communities along this coastline are particularly at risk to the impacts of ocean toxicity, seafood contamination, and also just changing oceans and climate crisis. So the fellowship called for a 6-week on-site residency. I feel like I've been living in Southern California for the past 5 years, doing all of this work. So I would go down for a few weeks or a month at a time. I connected with community anglers, so angler fisher folks, people who are fishing with a pole and line, we distinguish that because folks who have more economic resources or folks who are doing commercial fishing often are taking boats a few miles off the coast where the impacts of the dumping and the contamination are much less intense. So that's why there's a focus on the line fishing off the shore. But yeah, so I connected with a bunch of community anglers. I was guided by the NOAA recreational fisheries coordinator that's centered in Long Beach named Daniel Stett. And together we went out and conducted a series of informal dock walking tours. Most of these locations that we focused on, they're free fishing sites, so they don't require a fishing license, which makes them easier to access, but at the same time makes them hidden from NOAA's traditional surveys. So there's not data, their data isn't really being collected about what folks are experiencing fishing in these areas. The questions that we asked were crafted to learn about the needs and experiences of people fishing in these areas. We were really interested to learn if people were eating what they were catching, and if they had any awareness of the Palos Verdes Shelf Superfund site or the profound DDT dumping in the area. We wanted to know where they were getting their fishing information from. And most of the folks that we met were super excited to engage with us and offered really generous responses. I think there's a very healthy and substantiated fear of federal government. I think the one exception is some of the work that NOAA has been doing is so deeply critical to our understanding of our own environmental conditions, how we impact them, and how they impact us, right? So folks were happy to talk to NOAA. The work that came out of this, I entitled the project Our Waters, and it kind of pulled all of the research and the interview processes into a series of oil paintings, which I'll share in just a moment. I also created a digital story map that's hosted on the NOAA fisheries site that sort of details the work and the process, has a list of resources, has a call for feedback page for community members wanting to share their stories or ask questions to sort of continue the engagement and develop a connection between NOAA and the community members. I presented two live show or two like sort of art shows in Long Beach in 2024. So one at the NOAA headquarters and then a few different locations along the shoreline. And we just like went out with a tent, hand out information and gifted prints of the paintings to the anglers and community members that showed up. And it was really special because a lot of the folks that we interviewed ended up coming out and finding us again. So really like focusing on relationship building and trust building in these communities around this work. And then finally, I gave a virtual speaking tour of the process and of my recommendations as an artist, which felt very wild and cool, to hundreds of NOAA employees and administrators across the country who were responsible for managing this work. So I'm going to just show a few of the paintings that I made from the series, and I've added some quotes. They don't match up one-to-one. I was just trying to give kind of like a scope, a slice of the scope of the project. And while I scroll through them, I'll just speak a little bit to my findings or my interpretation of the work that I did. So like I mentioned, Long Beach is extremely diverse. There's over 15 common languages spoken in the area. So needless to say, we encountered a diversity of cultures at each location. And as is true with environmental racism and classism and in any other part of the world, it's always minority and low income communities that are the most targeted and impacted by toxic dumping, heavy industry, and climate crisis. We learned that there's a really profound value to the fishing experience itself for most people, right? So whether it's for food, for family bonding, or for recreation, or for cultural preservation or spiritual connection to the land, that's long been demonstrated by the local indigenous communities' stewardship of the land, like that of the Hashma and the Tongva peoples, right? But it's something that is really culturally valued by a myriad of communities. We also learned that shoreline communities care very deeply about seafood safety. They want to be informed, and they definitely are not being properly informed about potential contamination of various areas and species. There's very limited signage on the piers. What we did find, they were outdated, they were weathered, and mostly available in English only, which is a very big problem, right? When there's this big of a risk, especially learning that a lot of folks are eating the contaminated seafood that they're catching, unaware of the risks to their health. And it's complicated because although NOAA manages some of these issues, there's these overlapping jurisdictions. It's like kind of a mess. So like different species or different areas are managed by other agencies. So like the city of Long Beach or the state of California, right? So there's an additional challenge there and an urgent need for cross-agency collaboration, which definitely takes a hit when funding and staffing goes down. These angler communities are often absent from the fishery management process. So like, for example, local meetings, they're often missing the opportunity to advocate for themselves and their needs. And this is really like an issue of accessibility. It's a privilege, if you think about it, to be able to, leave your job and travel to wherever a fish policy meeting is being held or a roundtable at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. So often those meetings are dominated by the more economically resourced, so like commercial fishing interests. And you can see how that is an inequitable way to engage the communities. So I came out of this understanding that these at-risk communities want to be included. Obviously, they deserve to be included, but the ways that they're being reached out to are insufficient, and they need to be met where they're at, being like, on the piers, on the jetties, on the shorelines, in local tackle shops, or, on their smartphone. As we're talking now, as I'm speaking right now, NOAA is actively being dismantled by the current U.S. administration, illegally, I might add. So this is like an already overburdened sector of the government, right? NOAA, who provides this critical life-saving data, they're having their DEI initiatives obliterated and their programming gutted and their operations stalled. The fellowship that I'm reporting on right now is currently static and discontinued for the moment. And I think it's important to consider the physical impact of these issues, right? Like, it's terrifying to think about seafood safety or climate crisis and how that's going to affect us on a physical level. I think it's also important to kind of recognize the emotional impact that social oppression as it relates to climate injustice kind of has, right? So even though what I'm presenting on right now, like these frontline communities are disproportionately impacted, I think it's really critical to understand that there's no one that this doesn't affect. No one's immune from climate crisis, right, in the situation that we're in. So just to end with this project with some of like the questions that I had coming out of it, thinking about like, how do we find motivation to act? And where are there opportunities for collaboration under conditions of climate injustice and a government that's intent on violently attacking its own population? So, thinking, how can art support this shift? I think for me, what art does, or, when it's effective, is that it stimulates emotion. So the value of art, or the value of the work of the artist, in my opinion, is to find that emotional thread and sort of pull people back into a space of feeling. I think that devaluation of, or exploitation rather, of emotion is a tactic. It's often for the sake of profit and power. And look at what it's done to our planet and our oceans and our communities. Just look at what we're experiencing right now as a global community and as a country. I really deeply believe that one of our best tools as artists is to find an emotional response within ourselves to these issues, to let that motivate our creative work, and to take it very seriously, that it's our job to inspire solidarity and collective action with the work that we produce. So I'll just speak for just 1 minute on what I'm currently working on. Deep is a project that I'm developing right now, and it's based on the last 8 years of my research in ocean health. It's a multimedia live performance of data visualization and sonification from some of the data sets that I've been given access to and contributed to. It includes 3-dimensional data, so like LiDAR scans, which you can see on the leftmost image on the screen, field recordings. That's me on screen, right, taking some sonic recordings on the Long Beach coastline facing oil islands, which is less than a mile off the coast of Long Beach, active oil drilling. And my policy research goes into this too. So it's just sort of a culmination of all of the data that I've collected and been exposed to over the last 8 years. It's currently in the iteration process. So this image is of a live performance that I did in February this year in Portland, Oregon at Performance Works Northwest with a collaborator doing visuals named Megan McKissick. And the next steps are sort of to grow the scope of the work, to include live dancers, to find opportunities to show this in multiple locations. I'm in the grant writing, fund seeking step of the work. My effort, I think, is to continue creating art that brings action to topple systems, industries, and individuals that are robbing a habitable world for the majority of living beings. I think I'm doing my best with this work and previous projects to translate complex data into a digestible emotional experience, to urge people to feel something that motivates them to defend the most precious thing of all, which is our earth, right? Our waters and all of the life forms that animate them. Thank you for listening. You can take questions.
Thank you so much, Kat, for giving us a great and comprehensive look into your work, especially your more recent stuff and what you're looking at right now. As you said, data is such an amazing tool to have, but being able to understand it and put it into practice is part of the process in order to make it, easy for everybody to really benefit from in the end. Just as a quick reminder, folks, as we are entering the Q&A portion for tonight, please use the Q&A feature, and we've already gotten a couple of folks in here, so I'm going to go ahead and start addressing them, and we can continue the conversation a bit more. We have our first question starting off is from a psychologist who's working on social justice for people with disabilities, who's also a photographer, AI enthusiast, and hobbyist computer programmer with own disabled experiences, and is interested in learning more about how these projects were funded. You touched a little bit on the grant funding process and how they found their audience, and really appreciates your time this evening as well, Kat.
Yeah, okay. Great question. So how were these funded and how did they reach their audience? I think just to reiterate, okay. So the NOAA Fellowship pilot, the first one was funded with federal funding, right? So within NOAA, and I'm pretty sure that it's similar in a lot of other federal agencies. It's like the federal government has money and you have to grant right to ask for it. So you have to propose projects. At the time, DEI was on the rise and folks were excited about this. So there was more attention to these initiatives. So Ruth Howell, as I mentioned, who's the communications manager at the Northwest NOAA Fisheries branch, she wrote a grant and solicited some funding. After that pilot, they took that as sort of like a proof of concept. And then they partnered with another institution, which is the ACAD, the Association of Independent Colleges of Art and Design. And together they wrote a grant. So it's like for a lot of folks that are in art, grants, or a majority of fields, right, in the sciences, like grant writing is a huge way that you get funding. And it's not dissimilar when it, or at least it wasn't dissimilar at the time that these were incepted, that you would apply via a grant. So like, I know that the last run of NOAA fellowships was on a 5-year period. So it was enough funding for 5 artists over 5 years to engage with the agency. And then how did they find their audience? I think I think you mean for the work. I'm going to answer it like the audience for the work. What's so fascinating about this pilot is even though a lot of the work ended up becoming public facing, like I think artists before me did some like public installations. So it wasn't hidden from the public by any means, but like a huge point of this fellowship was to engage the communities that were each year had a different community or issue that they were focusing on. So to engage the communities and then also to engage folks at NOAA. So it was like a huge part of the role was like reminding scientists at NOAA how creative their process really is and like bringing the heart back to their work. I think like something that I witnessed at least is that they were, folks at NOAA were a huge part of my audience because if you can imagine working on like a single, working within the federal government, but B, like working on a single issue for many, many years, like how you can kind of get lost or desensitized in ways, right? So like, I felt like a lot of it was cheerleading in a way, or like bringing back, like, this is so important. This is so amazing. This is so creative, really like the work that you're doing. And so yeah, the audiences were, I think, threefold: the communities, the folks at NOAA, and then public facing.
And that totally makes a lot of sense. I like that you use cheerleading for it because, you know, you do have people in these roles that are just so focused in, and sometimes they don't even get the recognition at times too until something comes up at the same time even. So it's really exciting to kind of hear the discussion and see it actually be put into some of that, which is why, as you said earlier, the fellowship did get piloted to kind of have this kind of cross-disciplinary interaction going on as well.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. And then moving on to our next question. Appreciate all the questions tonight. The multidisciplinary nature of your work is so interesting and important. This person would like to hear how this ability to see such important connections across disciplines was nurtured during your time in school and also your own practice. Specifically focus on maybe some of mentors that meant a lot to you during your time and any advice that you would give to potentially K through 12 educators to nurture students who have similar interests and abilities to kind of identify and understand these important connections?
Oh, that's such a sweet, I love this question. That's such a sweet question. I think across the board, I can say that what nurtured me the most is any sort of educator, teacher, or adult that I had in my life that saw my capacity or my interest in the creative field as something that was like able to be integrated into the world. I remember being young, like it was cool that I was interested in art, but that was like a separate class, and there was no crossover between like world history or any of the biology classes, science classes. I think that my greatest mentors were my art teachers and my science teachers for sure. I think any adult or educator that like really looked at me and listened to me, there's really so much that you can offer to a young person by just treating them like a human being, right? I think for K through 12, like that, going to the younger side of it, I think, just like, and I know that it's challenging and teachers are, for the most part, so incredibly under-supported and under-resourced, but I think bringing cross-disciplinary ideology into the classroom, whether it's like even in a project, like I have a niece who just turned 10, who's doing a report on polar bears. So like a contemporary issue is so much more tangible. It's so much easier to care about, right? And so she's doing something that's like science mixed with art. And I think for folks who are more inclined to, depending on like if they're neurotypical or like different ways that they think, or if they're hands-on learners, or I think if you present sort of a cross disciplinary based learning system, that folks will gravitate toward how they can express it. And then just keeping it contemporary, like young people deeply care, and they should care more even than folks who are older than them, right, about issues in the world. And they want to be, I think, included in the conversation. So that's how I respond to that. Talk to the kids.
Hey, you got to talk to the kids. They can usually identify things and have a great conversation about it as well. And it's great to hear that your niece is doing such a cool project as well on polar bears too. So cute. Mm-hmm. But no, and to just echo you on that, like having those inspirations, even if they might not be, the most understandable ones, like usually think of great figures and so on. Even it's as simple as you said, like an art school teacher or a science teacher from your earlier years or beyond, totally makes sense on that part. Sorry, it was something that was supposed to find me. I wanted to quickly circle back, and if anybody else has some quick questions they wanted to add in as well for the conversation. You touched a little bit on DocuGame and the kind of concept around that, and it's almost like its own little unique exploration into it. Has there been any other potentials for this, or how it's been promoted, kind of going with the accessibility on that, with it being virtual reality versus, a classic documentary, which is more video-based? It's more technology focused, I'm aware, but any additional thoughts you have on that and more of that emerging mediums that can exist crossing art and data?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and this is something that also has like bled into the NOAA work, right? Like we've, with the mentors that I've had at NOAA, we've definitely had big conversations about like, okay, how do we reach people? How do we integrate media? How do we follow these threads? I think with the Gone to Water project, so the VR docu game, at the time we were creating that, I mean, it was COVID, like everything felt a little bit upside down and wild. And at the time we were like, yeah, everything's going to be VR. We need to make sure that there's like a diversity of input in that space, because everything is real estate or first person shooter games, right? So at first we were trying to like stop the colonization just of the medium. And that was like our thought process. as we realized it and got toward the end of the project, it's not super accessible, right? And what is very accessible, though, are phones. There are more people in the world that have smartphones than are housed. Like, these are things that are in everybody's, mostly everybody's pockets, right? So thinking about how to access like that media that is readable on those devices. So again, like a conversation that's like been around NOAA. I know that social media has been on the rise with NOAA communications, and they're like starting to recognize that over the last few years as like a really critical space. And it's just sort of wild, right? Like, the internet is wild, and there are these important places for discourse, but they're also like not appropriate for every type of discourse, right? And they're not all being managed by like someone that I would trust to manage a system, right? Like a billionaire owning a company, and then that's our place for public. So there's a lot of like moral and like sort of social implications for using these as tools to communicate, at least from the NOAA side, right? But that set aside, something that we have talked about a lot, something I've been thinking about a lot, is like creating AR or sort of like 3D games, just like that you can play on your phone. I think I wish I didn't want to lean into media that way because I feel inundated by it and kind of overwhelmed by it personally. I just want to like touch grass. I want everybody to touch grass. But I do think there is a profound kind of like importance to bringing a different type of experience to these platforms, right? So like bringing something that's like art focused or actually like informative or calming in some way, or like based in truth, like a documentary style, or increasing knowledge as opposed to like being a distractive tool.
That's awesome to hear. And just for context, for some folks who might not know some of the topics we're discussing, AR is augmented or artificial reality, and VR is virtual reality. I believe we touched upon that earlier, but also it was part of accessibility is making sure people understand the terminology going into that as well. But I get what you mean about being inundated with certain things, such as constant access to media and different evolutions of that as well. But, having to meet people where they are also is the case of making sure people can understand it too.
Yeah.
And then we just had a quick question pop in on the side from a person. How did the communities you were working with react to the project? And what are some of maybe their own efforts moving forward, either being inspired by this or just kind of seeing this work being done and accessible to them?
Yeah, so I guess there's sort of two answers to that, because the first project that I worked on, the Gone to Water VR project, there was way more intensive collaboration. That was a 4-year-long project and way more immersed in these communities. So these were more like the land-based communities in South Los Angeles. And so that's their feedback is more than I could ever explain in this one meeting. But the overarching thing is that they were super excited to work with artists creating a piece. And what we were doing more than like creating this work is we were sort of like sharing the work that they're already doing. So we were working with nonprofits and like folks who are on the front lines doing an incredible amount of labor defending their own communities. So that was the experience, sort of this like anti-urban oil. So they felt grateful and excited to collaborate with us to share the message outright. It became like a fun art project that we were able to work on together, but they're doing their own work. I think as far as on the NOAA side, that was a totally different type of experience because there was a lot less funding. I was working on my own. The scope was way smaller just in time. And there hadn't been a lot of outreach from NOAA, period. So a lot of folks were hearing from NOAA for the first time in that context, right? So it wasn't that we didn't meet folks who were already kind of doing their work and interested, but I think the general sense with the NOAA canvassing or field research that we did was folks were totally aware of NOAA and that this is like a resource, and folks like wanted to report to us. So like I have notebooks and notebooks full of like, oh, I saw this species here. a few years ago, but we haven't seen them, or like, why are the halibuts so small, or why this and this? Like, they view NOAA as a source of information. And there was definitely some expression of like, we're not getting enough information. We don't know what's going on. As far as like I feel like folks in general respond so well to art, right? A lot of the folks that we met were artists themselves. So I think like pushing forward like that response that art is powerful and like a tool for communication, that was really successful. I think with the NOAA project, what is disheartening about that is that now that the DEI initiatives are cut and the fellowship is stalled, it's like what the project that I worked on was really just an opening and really just like the beginning of like relationship building or starting these conversations, you know? So it wasn't, I feel like it was stopped way before there could have been more progress and collaboration, or how, you know, supporting communities and having these resources to be informed, right?
Absolutely. And I'm reminded of, I believe it's part of the excerpt from the interview you sat down to do with Willamette magazine as well, where people being able to also communicate not just the data that's being talked and how on that's going, but like themselves as artists and creatives too, and being able to express that and kind of share that. I think in part of that, where you discussed too, was sometimes even, as you said, kind of getting that acknowledgement or even that recognition from the community, and then them also receiving recognition as well comes into that. So that's my big takeaway from how you've described that as well too. And then another quick question that just popped in for you: what would you like to see this work evolve into in a perfect world, ideally, if funding wasn't a barrier?
Well, imagine. Yeah, if funding wasn't a barrier, I would imagine just on the, I'm not even going to answer that in like a perfect, because I could say like, oh, I'm going to reform all the, yeah. So just in like from an art project standpoint, or from this like art and science project, I think workshops would be really cool, like more in-person events. Like if NOAA had the funding and artists had the funding to collaborate to do beach art projects or beach cleanups, or even larger kind of like contextual things like educating people, doing the relationship building, and extending that into like empowering folks to protest, or empowering folks to go to their own local council meetings, or I guess just like generating solidarity around this shared interest of caring about the health of our oceans and caring about our health and caring about each other, right? So I think way more hands-on, way more on the ground activities that kind of like not just empower, but also just like offer what's owed to these communities who have been like, I don't know, not every community is suffering from like toxic chemicals in their face. Like the health impacts are egregious. It's terrible. It's terrifying. And it's not equal, right? Like certain communities are not being subjected to this. So I think I would also say like retributions. I'd also hope that there'd be like, yeah, money for cleanup and money to families who are impacted most by this.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. And, you know, perfect world, everything. Honestly,
yeah,
you gotta start and meet where you can. Of course, and beach cleanups are a great way to do that, as many people know, and it would be great to see more of that work being done as well, and improving that too. Mm-hmm. And then to quickly circle back before we transition into our closeout section, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm getting this off the beat. You're currently in the middle of your work for DEEP, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe just a slight peek behind the curtain, kind of when you're anticipating this work to be done. I know you mentioned earlier tonight, you felt like you were living in California for 5 years almost during the course of the NOAA fellowship, for instance. And this is also another project that is encompassing, I believe, more of the Pacific Northwest and some trips back to California too. What kind of is your intention right now in a timeline, or maybe tangibles, if we want to use that word again tonight?
Yeah, totally. Well, so Deep is a project that I'm working on my own. I did have and hope to have more in the future, but I did have a collaborator come on to do some live visuals for one of the performances, but it's kind of conceptualized and created by me and directed by me. So I have a lot more, I guess, freedom than in some of the previous projects that I've worked on, where there's a lot more stakeholders and a lot more collaborators. So right now it's a fully formed project, but I guess there are like a few moving pieces. I guess what I'm doing is kind of like sitting with my experience and synthesizing the last 8 years of everything that I've learned and been exposed to in all my experiences, and creating my own work out of that. Right. So there's been one performance I'd love to like grow it. I think for me, I love experimental performance. I think it's like an experimental theater. It's like, for me, one of the most complete works or total works of art. So I feel the most touched when I see live theater. So it's like what I'm compelled to make in. So yeah, I have like the pilot, so to say, kind of in progress. And I mean, these works can take years to like develop out in a big way. Sometimes they never make it off the ground, but I would say that I'll probably dedicate at least the next few years to working on this and trying to grow it. I'm also working on trying to self-release an album, a sound album from all of the sound recordings that I got, and like the blue part of the NOAA sound recordings that I got. So that's a goal that I have to finish by the end of 2025. But yeah, I think even though I like really loved engaging with NOAA, and I consider that work to be so important, and I love working on these larger scale projects, I think I am, like a lot of people, just like holding on for dear life and trying to like get back to functioning, and trying to, like, at least a lot of the empaths and artists that I know are really struggling right now with like, figuring out how to respond to the world. So I'm kind of like taking this project as a way to like slow down and cultivate and focus. So yeah, I'm not super committed to any timeline. I'm letting it sort of unfold, which is a nice feeling.
Definitely. I mean, you don't want to be constricted all the time. And sometimes when we self-impose those deadlines too, it helps generate work in a way we don't expect as well. But it's cool to hear what you're kind of focusing on and the interests and kind of what the development will be of that too. And then I have to ask, is there currently a favorite sound that you've received from the NOAA recordings for your album, or a predominant sound feature that you're planning on including?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people ask me that, and there's so many, I mean, I love sound so much, and there's so many amazing sounds and kind of like new technologies for recording things. I know that like there's some gray whale sounds that just came out with like a higher fidelity, like they're more clear than any recordings before, but I haven't, even though I've been offered and granted access to the whale recordings, which are beautiful. I think my favorites are fish density recordings. So there's like a sonic pinging system that NOAA uses to ping out. And when there's a population of fish or anything in the ping, I guess, it comes back with a different tone. And those are so beautiful to me. I could listen to them forever. And they're extremely haunting too, because once you understand sort of the score, or like the what it means, right? Like a ping that comes back a tone where there's nothing there is like this haunting. I don't know. And it's probably not super recognizable unless you like go through and understand what the sound communicates. But those, I call them the fish density pings. Those are my favorites right now.
Let's give it up for the fish density thing. That's awesome, to say the least. So before we conclude this evening, Kat, I'd like to give you the floor one more time. Any other closing thoughts or commentary for tonight and discussing all your work and kind of the growth that's to come for your projects or just really anything.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. I love speaking about this work. It's so important, not just the work that I'm making, but just like in the field of social environmental justice. So thanks for everybody who came and participated and listened. I think one thing that I'd love to end on is just like reminding people that art is so powerful, even if it's just like the art of our daily lives, and that we're in this together, and it's never too late to like meet your neighbor or care about something deeply and like shift a behavior. And yeah, it's powerful. It's powerful to pay attention. It's powerful to engage, and you can do it.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So thank you all for joining us this evening and getting to be a part of this conversation. I truly want to extend my thanks to Kat for spending the time and getting a chance to talk more about their work. For those of us online, we hope that you found this discussion of great interest, and we obviously hope to see more artwork based in dialogue bridging and the ability to have these conversations with and around particularly disenfranchised communities, but just in our general life too. Once again, we look forward to seeing hopefully many of you again online for our next Willamette Dialogue, and we hope that you take care and have a great night.